council. It's certainly a privilege to be here on behalf of Governor McCrory, who asked me to look at all the options. We're going to show you the options. We're going to show you the impact of the options. And truthfully, this has, as Ned said, we came in $18 million under budget, or saved $18 million on the extra laneage, and by building it in concert with the project, and came in 2 years ahead of time. And so that's a good news story. As we look at the options now, moving forward, that's one of the things we need to have a conversation about, because there's pros and cons with every option. And so what I'm going to do is talk to you about options available, 485, project origin and evolution, just to bring everybody onto the same sheet of music, and then operational considerations, which do involve safety primarily. And so just real quick, the three options that are available are to drive on with the current plan, which essentially is in 16, the next project that made the draft transportation improvement plan, begin that express lane project. The second option has 2 or 3 different variants. Open that extra laneage as an HOV lane. You could open it permanently as an HOV lane. You could open it during rush hour or heavy congestion times as an HOV lane. And you could take a look at tolling that as an HOV lane. Those are 3 variants of one option. And then C, you could look at it as a general purpose lane. And there's some severe consequences to that based upon the plan that was submitted by the MPO and what this region asked for and what was submitted into the TIP, or the Transportation Improvement Plan. So now I'm going to address in detail those options. So let's back up and go through some of the history, which I'm sure many of you know, if not all of you. Built 8 projects between 88 and 96. The congestion improvement, it happened and now it's congested again, and I'll show you in a chart in a section where there is significant congestion, and then where we project in 15, 20 years there to be even more significant congestion. And then the regional study of alternatives resulted in a local choice to add managed lanes to future widenings for more predictable travel time. So that's the fast lane study, began in 07, and it examined existing and planned major highways, and it included really all the partners in the region here. And so it's not like it was a NCDOT driven deal. It was a partnership, a coalition of folks that came together to find the best transportation solutions for this region. And so you can see all of the different corridors here, from 77 to 277 to 74, 485. All of that was considered in that Fast Lanes Phase 3 study. So current project from I-77 to Ray Road. The project originally ended at Johnson Road. It was modified to change that eastern terminus to Ray Road. $14 million lower bid than the engineer's estimate, and it opened to traffic 2 years ahead of time. So saved $14 million and opened it 2 years ahead of time. And the additional pavement width included in the project, we expected to be finishing in December of 16, when we would then dovetail into the next project. And so that's sort of why we're here today. We finished 2 years early, and we saved a bunch of money, and now we've got to figure out how to move forward that satisfies the community. So this is a blow-up of the part of the 485 stretch we're talking about, from 77 to Ray Road, and that's the what TIP, Transportation Improvement Program project. And so as you think of this green strip, moving particularly from left to right on the map. The top chart shows all the current state of affairs. It goes from 4 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes. If we open it in some fashion, whether as a general purpose or an HOV lane, it'll go from 5 lanes to 4 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes. And so when you hear Ned, my chairman, talk about safety considerations, this is one of the areas that the professional engineers get very concerned about when you go in a pretty compressed distance from 5 to 2 lanes. We're concerned about going from 4 to 2 lanes. And when you go from 5 to 2 lanes, there's second order effects that create that accordion effect and the congestion, accidents, people trying to pass the congestion and get in front of the queue and so forth. So that's part of the operational consideration. When you look at this chart, so this is the project area, and you've got the 2012 annual daily traffic, average daily traffic, and what you see is that area really where the 2 red blocks are. That's the area we're really talking about, and that's where the congestion is today. And then as you move further out, it gets less congested. Now, when you look at our 20-year plan, it's congested all the way if we don't do anything. And so we know we've got to do something. And this is just to show the volume to capacity ratios, as the engineers call it. It's congestion, right? We don't have enough capacity for the volume today in the specific areas that are highlighted there, and then certainly along that whole corridor, it's going to be congested if we don't do anything. And so what are the reliable ways of finding congestion relief? And that was the managed lane, express lane project that was planned by the local MPO and submitted to NCDOT from 77, I-77 to US 74, and that is to provide congestion relief, and it's 16 and a half miles, begins a $220 million project that begins in FY17. So that's the study corridor right there, and so that is really the project. That's what was going to dovetail right into this project, the previous project, and because we finished two years early, we've got this lane. So now, back to the options. Option A, continue with the current plan. That is an option, of course. Leave the extra pavement as currently designated, start the new project as soon as possible. We're looking to see if we can't move that some to the left on the calendar. And of course, from an engineer point of view, from the folks that really look at our safety, it allows the traffic to stabilize with the current weaving and lane change movement. So that's an option. The governor's charge was consider all options, and that's what we're doing. So option B, open as an HOV lane. It's not available until we do environmental documents for the next phase, and that should be August. So we've got some work to do there, but it's an option, and we can communicate that if this is the way, as we work in partnership with the MPO and with all of you to move forward. If this is the choice that we collectively make, then certainly we can communicate that we're going to head in this direction. It does not alleviate the current lane reduction issue of 5432, but it's an option that we are considering. And it introduces that additional lane merge that I showed you. But it does preserve the flexibility for the MPO preference for using added capacity as a managed lane. So you do not lose, if we go HOV here, you do not lose capability to then follow the MPO's desire to have a managed lane. I'm going to spin to my federal highway guy. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Okay. And John's a pro, and that's why we brought him down here. Option C, open as a general purpose lane. That's not available until final asphalt's in place in April. The current project certainly would not alleviate the current lane reduction. In fact, compounds it by allowing traffic to go 543. It's the same deal. And it does, however, remove the capability to follow the MPO preference for using added capacity as a managed lane. And I think probably to get a little bit inside baseball, if you went to this, then you would have to reevaluate the project that was scored in the transportation that's currently sitting 2 years away in the draft transportation improvement program, and you would have to rescore that project as a non-managed lane project. I'm going to spin to Lewis Mitchell, am I correct on that? Yeah, so that would come off. You would lose your 2017 slot, 17 slot. It would be rescored in 2 years, next time we rescore projects. And because of the cost of that project, and you're not getting any revenue out of it, who knows where it might end up. But it is an option to do, and I'm laying out the pros and cons here. So these are the three primary options, and I will go through them again. Can drive on as planned, allows the traffic to stabilize, but it does have that perception of extra laneage out there. Maybe we could be going faster, and so we've come up with the thought of using it as an HOV lane. Many of you likewise have come up with that thought, and it does not take away our future flexibility, but it creates a little bit of the merge issue. But our engineers are taking a look at that to see how we could work through that, of course, to make it as safe as possible if we went down this lane. And then general purpose lane, that would have two real impacts. The safety impact, and of course, is embedded in that. And then it removes the ability to revert that lane back to a express lane or managed lane. And then the third impact would be that you would have to rescore the existing project, and without the revenue contribution, so it would be a higher cost to the state, and we're not sure where that would fall out. So those are the three options that we see, and as I mentioned on the HOV lane, there's three. There's sort of a straight HOV, there's a rush hour HOV, and then if you wanted, you could toll during that HOV, that is an express lane. So now, we received some council questions, and I wanted to make sure that we answered these in the presentation or in our discussion. And so can the extra width be open to traffic for anybody to travel on? Why not? I think we answered that with the three options. And when will construction of the toll lanes start? Will traffic be required to stop using those lanes during construction? I think we answered, it's 2017 project let date on that. What month, Lewis, are we looking at?
Late fall 2016.
Late, so it would be fiscal year 2017. Late fall 2016 would be the let date for that project. And I would assume we would be able to keep on using that HOV lane if we were to convert it to an HOV lane. Is that correct? That's right. Okay. What will the Charlotte Planning Organization be asked to do? I think it's the request to make it an express lane came from the MPO. So we would, any change that NCDOT would contemplate on that extra laneage would have to be made in conjunction with the requesting authority, because the impacts could be huge, as I just said. So what we're asking is that we have that dialogue. Lewis has that dialogue daily. This is something that's on Chairman's radar, my radar, Governor's radar. We know this is a big deal, and we're working it. So we ask that the planning organization be a part of this discussion and a part of the solution moving forward. What are the safety and operational effects, benefits, consequences of allowing the extra width to be used by any vehicles, carpools, etc. So that was the, I talked about the safety effects. We're very concerned about the 5 to 4 to 3 to 2. If we open that, and there are ways to meter that a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're going to have weaving on the front end and you're going to have weaving on the back end. Just anybody who's driven, southbound on 95 out of DC on any day, and you're in that HOV lane, and you just pull right into the parking lot at the end of it. It'd be, potentially something like that. But so I feel like we've sort of answered, if not completely answered these questions. But what I want to do, I don't think I have any more slides. We have a non-discrimination ordinance, but I don't want to delay discussion of that, but I do want to answer any questions that you might have. Mr. Mayor, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Do you have any other members of your team want to?
No, John, was there anything that you wanted to say?
No, sir. I think you covered it.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I did have some council members who were interested in questions. They may take you back to earlier slides. So we
Sure.
I again want to thank you for doing this, and thank the governor too, please, for his attentiveness to this and being very responsive. We really do appreciate that. I'm going to start and go around, although I get complaints that I always start to my right, so I'm going to this time start to my left. Is that all right? So I'll start on this side and go around in the reverse direction.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Who's first? Councilmember Howard.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming out. Sure. But for also for you guys moving this project up several years before it was even supposed to start construction. So thank you for that. My question has to do with option B, 2 and 3. B and C. I can't remember what the options were, but the second one and the third one. So you mentioned it. You kind of mentioned that C. I think about that. Yeah. I'm sorry. You mentioned that C would have obvious effects on the TIP and the LIPP. Whatever it's called now. I'd love to know kind of a little bit more in depth. I mean, you really hit that one and you kind of kept going, but it would have a ripple effect on projects throughout our region. And I was wondering if you guys had even thought about what that would be. And I was wondering on option B whether or not that was the same case. And Lewis, maybe you could help me with this. If you move money, I don't know if you're moving money up to open it at HOV, and if that was the case, would that have a ripple effect on other projects, or could you do that out of money that you have already, or we continue to do that? I know you have.
So let me see if I can answer this, and then we'll go to Lewis to fill in any gaps. But if you open as a general purpose, you then take away the Federal Highway Administration will not allow you to convert that back to a managed lane. True?
Correct. To go to a managed lane, you have to add a new lane.
You'd have to add a new lane beyond that. So that lane that we had planned and built and saved money on and finished 2 years early, that lane would then just become forever a general purpose lane. And so that would trigger, though, the need to reevaluate its connective project, because we would no longer be able to turn that into a managed lane in the project that begins in the fall of 2016 as a managed lane. And so we would not be able to do that because it would run, it'd be a general purpose lane that would now not be, that project would not be a managed lane. And so you would have to, because the score involved the cost to the state, and because we calculated the revenue from the managed lane and lowered the cost of the state, now we would have to recalculate that and move it, of course the cost would be higher to the state, and it would have a different rating, a different score, may or may not make the TIP. as a managed lane. So there's that. And then on the general purpose, so that was, let's see, general purpose. Open as an HOV lane, as we talked, John Sullivan, our federal highway administrator, has said that if we open it as an HOV lane, then we can convert it to a managed lane or an express lane. Appreciate it. Okay. So does that answer your question?
Much like you do on 77, for the HOV lane there.
That's correct.
But there's no money loss in happening because it's really built as a managed lane, high occupancy lane.
That's correct.
Let's be very
So
clear on that.
John Sullivan wants
That's
to.
an important question Councilmember Howard is asking. If we made interim use for an HOV lane, would the costs associated with an interim use drop any of our other projects down the ranking or require them to be restored? That money's got to come from somewhere.
That's what it is.
And I think that's the important question.
And that's part of what we're analyzing right now. Louis, did you want to add to that? I mean, there is some cost, but
There would be additional costs for hardware and operational considerations, but we don't have that to a point where it's a refined estimate to know exactly what that dollar value is today.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing I add on C is that I would think that Rick would think of option C on other projects could be pretty major as well. So the MPO would have to would be reevaluating all projects. It could have a trickle down effect on other projects. Is that correct? As far as funding is concerned.
well, that extra lane is a part of the project that starts in September or fall of 2016. And so I don't know if you have other projects that are connected to that you would need to reevaluate, but for sure we would need to reevaluate this $200
Yes,
million.
just to add, what the Secretary said, that project would be a statewide level project, which comes off of the top 40%. And so we would have to evaluate that project then against other projects across the state and how it ranks with projects across the state.
That's actually pretty
So, and it's this project right here, from 77 to 74 for $220 million. That lane is part of that project. And so when Lewis and team saw the opportunity to get that lane at a savings of $14, $18 million, they did so. And so that's what we're talking about now. John Sullivan.
Mr. Mayor, and members of the council, I just wanted to clarify to the answer about the HOV option. So the question that the secretary and that has asked us, if they implement an HOV lane as an interim, will that allow the project or the corridor to go back to a managed lane? And I just want to explain, managed lane in our parlance is really an express lane, which is tolling all vehicles. And so when you mentioned the Interstate 77 project, that's taking an HOV lane and then going to a hot lane. So the answer that we gave to NCDOT is you could revert back to an express lane. I just wanted to clarify that.
Meaning, even vehicles with 3 or more people would be.
That would be up to a later decision. It could be implemented either as a hot or it could be whole all.
So we would still have that.
Yes, sir.
David, you served on the committee of 21 with me. Fallon, Ms. Lyles, you facilitated that. That was a 2007 committee that was tasked by this city council, by the county commission, and by the chamber of commerce to evaluate the challenges we face in our funding, in that case specifically roads. And I think the conclusion of that group was that we are $12 billion short in Mecklenburg County alone over the next 25 years in funding the transportation infrastructure that we envision we need for a good system, not a great, not an outstanding system. And we evaluated some 30 different types of funding options for roads, and one of the conclusions of that group was that whether we like it or not, tolling is going to have to be a component, because it was the only place we could see significant dollars while we transition to other funding sources. Same debate is occurring at the state level as we try to keep up with significant population growth that we're having into North Carolina. So as we have this conversation about the options, we need to remind them that the fast lane study was something that was part of our future. That's what created the opportunity to take advantage of this lane when we did it. But that also was critical to how we see ourselves being able to deal with the congestion and the pressures we're facing. we have to think about that as we evaluate different options.
Remember, anybody else? Councilor Phillips?
Yes, Mr. Secretary. With respect to option B, open as a HOV line, depending on the criteria we use for ridership, is it 2 people or 3 people in a car, will that standard be strictly enforced?
Will it be enforced?
Right.
Well, I'll talk to the Mecklenburg Police about that. But, the enforcement of any HOV lane relies really on the good conduct of the citizens and law enforcement. And that question really led us to a discussion about, do we want to put a gantry up, and which led to one of the sub-options of patrolling through some measure to make sure that what we've got going through there is either people in 2 or 3 HOV, or maybe if they want to pay, they can go in there and get a little bit more predictable travel time.
Anybody else over here?
Mr. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you.
Charlotte, and to the other folks that came with you as well. The question I had is, listening to everything you said, I've seen the news reports about this issue, and I appreciate your presentation. Do you all have a recommendation for what you'd like your outcome to be, whether it be A or B?
I think our recommendation will come from collaboration with the Charlotte MPO, the regional MPO here. And right now, our mission is to really show you the homework that we've done as far as planning and looking at the second and third order impacts of any particular option, and then get the MPO's input. Because one of the questions from y'all was, what's the MPO expected to do here? And certainly because the MPO drove the managed lane, express lane option, this specific project here, it would not be good business practice on our part to just unilaterally make a recommendation or decision. So we look forward to working with the MPO on this.
In terms of risk and reward, I heard you say that if you chose C, that the next project may get thrown out of line. If you choose B, there's some continued safety considerations, and A, while frustrating to the general public, may be the ultimate way to go. Again, without getting a recommend or a list of approvals from CRIPA. I assume those are the only 3 options that are in play.
Well, there's 3 options with 3 versions of the HOV lane.
Right.
And you can just run it straight HOV, whether it's 2 or 3. You could put a gantry up, which there would be expense there, but you would also recoup that expense with toll. And so that's. But I really want to address the fact that our engineers feel that A is the safest way to go, and that if you open that 5th lane and then go 4-3-2, you're creating unsafe conditions that could otherwise be avoided. So that is a factor as we talk about this, and we know that there's concern here in the region, and so we are looking at all the options, and we want to work with the MPO on this. We have no predetermined solution that we're coming down here to present what we've been looking at, and we have, of course, open ears to listen to feedback from the community and the council and the mayor.
I appreciate it. Thanks, sir.
Come this way.
Mr. Secretary, question on B, and I think the engineer will be able to help with this. I'm not asking for a definitive answer, but do you have an idea of how much it would cost? Is it $500,000, $1 million?
To do HOV,
Yeah.
Louis, what do you know?
For the signage and the conversion, we'd probably be looking at something in the $1 million range for the signage and the marketing. So we would have to have some type of guidance to show people exactly what HOV is. And as we get near the ends, determinized at both ends, we're going to have to merge those back into the general purpose lanes so they can have safe ingress and egress.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. So that $1 million would be taken out of what we're spending for the other lanes, for Independence and other projects?
Well, certainly as part of our highway trust fund, and we value those dollars.
But it wouldn't have to be totally refigured.
At this point, it would not.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I've got a couple questions. Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate your time. This is, you can imagine, a pretty important issue in South Charlotte. I've got a couple, 3 questions. You mentioned some environmental work. I think the date for completion was roughly August. I assume that's just typical phase 1 geotech type work. What is the purpose of said environmental work?
So if you have an extra lane with extra traffic and extra emissions, you must say, here's what the impact on the environment is. And so when we plan to move forward with the project that we're completing now, that was supposed to be done two years from now, but it's done early, that the environmental work was already underway for the next project, and it's going to be done in August, a full 15 months before the project starts. And so that environmental work will be available for us to be able to then say, okay, this lane, and we've got to go to John, and John, you want to talk about that.
Is that a federal?
Well, it is a federal requirement, and so what is the difference between what's out there in our current environmental document that approves the work that's out there today versus a modification? We have to look at, is that modification consistent with the NPO's transportation plan and the transportation implementation plan? So part of our work of doing the environmental process on an interim solution will be demonstrating conformity with the Clean Air Act.
Okay, fair enough. Question, so we talked about, I guess, that if you open it as a general purpose lane, I'm going to try to get all my terminology right. If you open it as a general purpose lane, you can't revert back to a managed lane. And I understand we're sort of dancing around funding impacts, but I'm trying to figure out how, if it doesn't revert back to a managed lane, how that negatively impacts the citizens of South Charlotte. Because I'm assuming there's probably an overwhelming preference for it to open as a general purpose lane so they can use the road. And I'm just trying to get a handle on what the consequences.
So this project is what was scored in the new law. This project scored very well, and it is scheduled for construction, to begin construction in 16 late fall. And it was scored as a managed lane, meaning that there was toll revenue that's going to be coming in, and because of the way it's a data-driven, it's not political, it's the cost of the project, it's part of the formula. That cost was lowered by the estimated revenue of this project. So, if you make part of this road a general purpose, meaning non-tolled road, then what you end up with is you've got a wholly different project than before, because you're not going to be getting any revenue, and therefore the score, it would be unfair to the 3,100 other projects that were scored to say, well, let's just hold this one right there because that 100 million in revenue or whatever it was isn't going to be coming in. So that would then make us pull this out of the draft transportation improvement program, rescore it when we do it. We do it every 2 years, and then see where it falls. And in best case, it would be 5-6 years from now. So you would lose time and you would lose money. And if it became a general purpose lane, which means a road that is not tolled.
And then last question, how many lanes of 440 in Raleigh, not the outer belt, but of 440 are managed lanes, so the inner belt line?
On the draft transportation improvement, presently none. 540 is 100% tolled. There are no other ways to get on 540 other than toll from the Triangle Expressway. But future on 40 through Raleigh, the managed lanes made the draft transportation improvement program.
I just want to point out that our good friends in Raleigh have 2 belt lines and we just completed ours. But I do thank you for standing up for the city. We do appreciate you coming.
I can't let something go unanswered there. 540 has 3 sections that have not been completed, so it would be sort of like that whole swath right there, plus the rest up to the top of the blue line that's not completed on the outer belt line.
Thank you, and we do appreciate your time.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming. I have a much greater understanding of this issue and appreciation of the safety factor. So I appreciate you taking time to come speak to us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I'm Ed Driggs. I'm actually Warren Cooksey's successor, which is a tough assignment. I had a couple of questions. I noticed when you talked about the pros and cons, there was no reference to the impact that these options have on travel times. So it seems to me there could be an important plus or minus if we actually knew how much difference this makes.
Yeah, it's, I didn't put it up there because it's 6 seconds is what our engineers have determined.
From where to where?
Well, from the, what's
It's
the,
the entire trip. What we've seen is when you look at the entire 8-mile stretch, it would save about 6 seconds in travel time.
Based on current traffic volume.
That's correct.
Right.
our traffic engineer has modeled this, simulated it, run simulations, and 6 seconds was the average travel time savings.
The next question is, a lot of people are aware of the Fed position on this and the point you made about you can't revert. But it seems to me that law was intended to address a certain situation where you took existing lanes and just suddenly started to make them managed lanes. This is an unusual circumstance. This thing was built from the outset this way and funded on that assumption. So I guess my question is there no appeal at all to common sense in terms of asking the Fed for an exemption from that requirement in this instance? Because this is not the situation that that rule is intended to address.
I would turn to my federal highway comments.
Actually, when Congress changed the highway bill in Map 21, they specifically modified the tolling language such that whenever an entity opens up a general purpose lane, what Congress says to toll the interstate system, we can only toll a lane or add a toll lane. We always have to maintain the same number of lanes that existed free before we touch the project. So what we run this through our legal counsel, and what they've interpreted, Congress was very specific. It's how many general purpose lanes were in place prior to the next project to implement a managed lane. And so that's why we've advised the state, if we open up as a general purpose lane, it is a general purpose lane. And so if we want to come back and implement a managed lane concept, we'd have to add another lane. So you have to maintain the same number.
I understand. It's just that it doesn't feel like that's what this is what Congress had in mind. But you're saying it would take an act of Congress.
Yes, sir. That's the Federal Highway Administration interpretation.
And what is the cost of leaving the lane closed? The issue has been raised, at least in some correspondence I've seen, that there is, in fact, compared to some of the costs that are pointed to for environment and stuff like that, there is actually a cost associated with keeping it closed. Is that right?
I'm not sure what cost there would be.
Arrows, signs, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, no, I read. There are barrels. There's
$40 a barrel.
Yeah, I saw some,
Right.
some
And
back in the
so,
office.
I thought those barrels were free, they grow like mushrooms.
The barrels are not a permanent fixture. They're there because of the active work zone. And the final striping pattern for these plans, that lane would be hatched out and we would have flexible delineators, something that's a little bit less intrusive to a vehicle if they had to pull off in case of an emergency. So the barrels will not be there after the project is completed.
One last thing, the point was also made that the safety issues that have been highlighted could be mitigated by staging the merges along this long stretch and still get the benefit of quite a big piece of the widening that maybe just cause them to converge a little earlier and not have so compressed a narrowing. I mean, does that help with one of the issues that we've talked about here?
Well, certainly if we go to B or C, we would do this in the safest way. The engineers would map this thing out and figure out when you get in there and when you get out of there. And so, absolutely, if we deviate from A, then the safety becomes the driver for this thing.
So
Because A is the safest operation right now, but if there's, as we work with the MPO, if there is a feeling that B or one of the other options is the way we want to go, then we will drill down on how to do it the most in the safest way possible.
So District 7 particularly appreciates you coming here to talk to us. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Mason.
Entire district.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for joining us. I just want to get a little clarification. So we started out the conversation speaking to the savings. I believe we said it was around 14 million. Has those dollars been allocated? So it was questioned the cost of the HOV lane, say it could be around $1 million for signage and the marketing around it. Has that 14 million already been allocated to this project? What
Yeah,
are we
so
doing with the savings?
So when we did the design build contract, the engineer estimate was X, and the project actually came in at X minus 14 million, and so that 14 million goes into the remains in the trust fund. Just we don't write the check for X, we write for X minus 14 million, and so that has remained in the trust fund and gone to fund other projects.
So that, for clarification, back to my question, has the 14 already been allocated to additional projects, or as projects come along, are you spending the savings?
Yes, the 14 million along with, we about $1.5 billion every year. The new transportation improvement program, all that money is allocated. So if what you're getting at is there $14 million sitting around, no, there's not. It has all been allocated against projects. We have 3,100 projects that were submitted by MPOs and RPOs around the state. 1,800 highway, 1,300 non-highway, bike ped, ferry, rail, transit, etc., airfields. And so of those 1,800 highway, they get about 90% of the funding, and then the rest, there's 4% set aside for the non-highway, and then highway and non-highway compete for that remaining 6%. But all of that money is spoken for in the new draft transportation improvement program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming today, and I think we've got some great questions. I'm going to go a little off script here, and it looks like we're getting ready to add on about 17 more miles of state on the highway. Are you familiar with the condition of trash and debris that's all around our interchanges and operations around here? And the reason why I ask is because I spend my weekend with a trash bag in my car trying to pick up trash along these exchanges, and I've tried to work very diligently, and I will share that I've worked hard with NCDOT. But it's a bad reflection of the city of Charlotte when we have trash everywhere, and we're trying to work with that, and you guys have some different schedules. Can you address that?
Absolutely, I'll address it writ large for the state, then I'm going to turn it over to Lewis to talk about it for Division 10. But we have lawnmowers and trash collectors. We even contract and give about $8 million to the prison system, and they come out and clean up on schedule. The funding right now for particularly the highway fund, where this money comes from, is very, very tight. We've got an increasing population. We're the 9th largest state now in the nation. We've got decreasing revenues because of gas tax. We're reliant, 75% of the highway fund is reliant upon motor fuels tax, and motor fuels, cars are more efficient now, so we're either flat or declining in revenue there. And so the divisions are having to make very difficult, challenging decisions with regard to, do I do maintenance here? Do I have trash crew go out? Do I do lawn mowing? How frequently do I do that? When do I do that? And so that's a pretty common issue throughout the state, that division engineers are having to make tough decisions with the funds, the maintenance funds they've got. I'll let Lewis address the litter problem here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. In regards to litter pickup frequency, typically in Mecklenburg, we're on about a 6 to 7 week cycle. We have enhanced our presence inside the 277 area. That's about a 4-week cycle. And we do the mowing the same. But as the Secretary said, with the increased population, increased traffic, some of it, probably unintentional debris coming from vehicles and just a general increase in population, we do have to have a much denser presence here in Mecklenburg. But 6 to 7 weeks for most of Mecklenburg and Cabarrus, and about 4 weeks around the 277 area.
So I will just share with you, that's not working. That's not working. We're a high urban community, and what we're getting is that people are driving through our cities, throwing trash out. It's giving a bad reflection on the city. So I would ask that we kind of address that in a different cycle, because I can go out most weekends and pick up, but not necessarily what I want to do, particularly when it's a state responsibility.
We certainly appreciate your efforts, and we hear your message, and we'll take that. We have a division engineer meeting once a month, and we've got one coming up here soon, so we'll have a conversation about that.
I'm going to suggest this is a topic we may want to have a fuller discussion at a different time, and perhaps Mr. Mitchell can talk to either the Transportation Committee or the full council at another briefing. This was a perpetual topic every year. I was in the General Assembly, and a big one. It was not treated lightly. So
And it's not constrained.
it's not. Mr. Secretary, I want to bring us back to the item on the agenda here, and thank you again. I have 2 questions for you to close out. If again, this is a good instance, I guess, of no good deed goes unpunished. If you brought this project in on time, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. You would just move right into the next phase of the project. If we let the next phase in 2017, when would it be completed and have the whole 16 miles available for traffic?
It would probably be post to 2019. That would be a safe bet. I wouldn't want to make you a promise that I could deliver any earlier, but 2019 would be a safe bet.
Is it possible, on a managed lane concept, to open a managed lane in stages so that we could, for example, if your decision and the recommendation, NPO's decision were to wait on what we do with the current lane that's out there and then go ahead with the 2017 project, would we then be able, as we're doing construction of a bigger project, to open the managed lane in stages along the way?
That is possible if we put the tenants in the contract prescribing that the contractor opens the lane in stages. Oftentimes, I would put a caution there. When you do get that restriction, then often it comes with increased cost. But that is possible.
It's got a price tag. Second question, and you may or may not know this, is When do you foresee you'll be reporting back a more, your deeper dive into the three options to the MPO? When would that probably occur?
I'm going to ask Lewis to reach out to the MPO. I'm sure he's already done that, and we'll huddle up after this. And we really wanted your feedback today, and certainly appreciate everyone being here and the invitation to come down. So, Lewis, do you have anything?
As the Secretary mentioned, it is a collaborative approach with the MPO because it does have ramifications on the entire region and the projects in the air quality model. And so the MPO tests and is the keeper of the model for us. And we will have those conversations with your technical staff to see what the best results.
Yeah, and so, from a timeline perspective, we're moving on this pretty quickly because we know that it's a communication issue as much as it is anything right now, because let's say you chose option B and it was collective decision. Well, we can't do anything till August anyway, but we want to get set whether or not it's A, B, or C, and make sure that we communicate that appropriately. So we're talking days and weeks here. We're not talking months.
Well, I appreciate that. I understand you can't put a firm date on it, but we appreciate that. You jumped right on this, and we really do appreciate that too. And you know that we're going to be as responsive as you need us to be as you evaluate the options. Councilmember Lyles is our MPO representative, so she may want to handle this.
Well, I just wanted to say we do have a MPO meeting or CARPO meeting next week, so I didn't hear you say days, and then that leads us into March. But I'm going to assume by this we'll hear from NCDOT. That'll be a report, and then the usual process for CARPO is to hear the report and not act on anything for 30 days, considering the number of members that we have and the depth and width of our region. So I would assume that at the earliest it would be April.
Right, so Lewis will brief at that meeting this same slide deck plus probably some more specific information. And then a month later, y'all decide. There might be some interim meetings in there, so weeks.
Mr. Secretary, thank you again. Mr. Curran, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Cooksey, even you, Mr. Senator. Thank you all. Councilmember Howard, you're going to close out.
Before you guys leave, just to go back a little history of this, being the former member of the NPO, most of these folks were on the representative city. In each one of these situations, when we talk about using managed lanes, all of it was always about moving people as soon as we could. That was always what the point of it was. Waiting for general purpose money seemed too far into the future. This gave an option to do it quicker. I guess I want to go on record to my MPO rep that option B makes a lot of sense if we can figure out the safety issues with the transition lanes. Because what it does is gives you an opportunity to start to move people, which is what that whole approach is the reason we went in that direction from the beginning. So just on the record, because you wanted to get feedback, that one would be of interest to me, just on the record.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest in transportation and NCDOT and for the great feedback, because this is how we operate. We take feedback and make decisions, and we work collaboratively.
We like that, and we like the fact that you're willing to think outside the box. Thank you. Mr. Hagan, you are in charge of the next two items.